During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk a little about row spacings in crops.
As farmers are seeding various crops, they often have a certain row spacing in mind that they want to achieve. So they want the plants to be a certain distance apart. Let's take corn, for example. When I was growing up, our dad had wide row corn, which in our area meant it was either going to be 36 or 38 inches apart. Why 36 or 38 inches? Well, the tractors that Dad ran had wider tires, and this allowed him to reduce compaction on the soil. So he put his tires out there in between those 36 to 38 inch rows that worked great for him for many purposes. He was able to use big tires to reduce compaction. He kept the plants enough of a distance apart that he could get through and easily cultivate and do many different field operations. However, he figured out maybe a few years into our life, I don't know how old we were, maybe 12 years old or something, that, I'm not maximizing my yield. The guys that are using narrower equipment, narrower tires and these types of things, and had narrower rows, 30-inch rows at that time was considered narrow, well, they were beating me in yield. And if I can get more yield, I'm gonna have to make some changes on my farm.
Well, why would they get more yield in narrower spacings? What it really comes down to, and what we as farmers often have to think about, is we're harnessing the potential of the sun. If we can capture sunlight and take that energy and turn that into more yield, well, that's ideal. Sunlight hitting the ground doesn't do us a lot of good in many cases, but sunlight hitting the plant, well, hey, that's what we're after. So many farmers started going to drilled, or in other words, 7-inch all the way up to 10-inch spacing, so very narrow, for crops like soybeans, wheat, many other small grains. That's great in terms of capturing that sunlight. The problem with that is, well, now when we have that dense canopy out there, it traps moisture, and yes, it's great for environments where we don't have a lot of moisture, but when you have trapped moisture, what does that mean? That means that there's going to be moisture sitting on your leaves much longer than in those wider rows. Well, the longer you have moisture in the leaves, the more prone to disease you are. So that means we need more tolerant varieties for disease. We also need better fungicides.
I think you're jumping the gun here just a little bit, Brian, talking about mid to late season problems. We've got to get the crop out of the ground. One of the things that we find as we move to wider rows, well, if we're planting, say, 30,000 corn seeds per acre and we only have a row every 3 feet, well, yeah, we got a lot of seeds. They're pretty close together. But if we narrow those rows up and we still stay at 30,000 plant population, now the seeds have a lot of distance between them and they don't get some help from the other seeds around them for push. Now with corn just has to put a little spike out of the ground. It's no big deal. But with broadleaf crops like soybeans, for example, the 2 halves of the soybean seed are the first 2 leaves that are going to come up out of the ground. And that plant has to push those leaves up through the soil surface. If there's any kind of crusting out there, it sure helps having more seeds closer together. So we'll see a lot of farmers that'll adjust row spacing to try to have lots of seeds close together so they can get more push.
All right, so Darren and I could go back and forth with the positives and the negatives of a narrow row spacing. But the whole point here today is that in almost any crop, there are different row spacings and different reasons why farmers use those. And that's the reason why we wanted to talk about that just a little bit today.
And one of those reasons is to try to control, or at least slow down, our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this weed later in the show.